everyone. Welcome to PATAS Weekly. We are live, and this is our first episode of PATAS Weekly ever. Today is Saturday, May 2nd, 2020, and it is a great day not to get infected with COVID. In addition to this program, the PATAS Incorporated also has a blog that is updated several times a week. Simply go to patasinc.org to read the blog. There you can also donate to the organization. Also, if you are willing and able to provide a donation, you can do so via patas.org/donate. Follow the instructions through PayPal and provide a donation and show your support. As this is our first episode, I'd like to extend a thank you to PATAS Inc. for their support in allowing me to host this program. Richard DeLita, President and Chairman of PATAS Incorporated, for his generosity in allowing me to come here and let some guy he's only met once basically take over his organization and go through as if I have any expertise on anything. I'd also like to thank all the wonderful, godless heathens who volunteer to further the movement of reason in the Philippines, who help support PATAS Incorporated through their hard work for editing the blog and managing the Facebook pages, YouTube channels, etc. We'd also like to extend a special thank you to LGBT Bus and thank their president, Reggie Passion, for the continuous support. Thank you to Better Philippines, the president, Jaziel Taiko Ferrer. I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher all these names, for the Project Logos partnership. Thank you to the Humanists International. Thank you for helping support us with a membership. That would be President Sonia Egerix of Humanists International. Thank you to Evolutionary Humanists Berlin Brandenburg. That would be EHBB, the president Helge Haufe, I think. Sorry about that. And thank you to the Secular Therapy Project and Recovering from Religion, which now has a branch here in the Philippines where we provide support as well. We would also like to thank Jennifer Gutierrez and Bobli Olarte. I'm really doing my best here. So thank you to all of you for your support, and thank you to all the wonderful people who support the show, and the PATAS Incorporated as well. So we are here today. What are we going to be talking about today? Well, as you can see, the title is called Pray the COVID Away. So what is that all about? What are we talking about? Pray the COVID away? Well, there was an article recently that discussed the non-believers turning to prayer in crisis, which you can see here. Non-believers turning to prayer in crisis. Poll finds family and friendships top the list of reasons to call on God rather than global issues such as poverty or disasters. For many non-believers, it is an instinctive response to a crisis, please God, so perhaps it should not be surprising that a new survey has found that 1 in 5 adults pray despite saying they are not religious. Just over half of all adults in the UK pray, and they are increasingly likely to call on God while engaged in activities such as cooking or exercising, according to the poll. Although 1 in 3 people pray in place of worship, and a third pray before going to sleep or on waking. Others combine prayer with daily activities. 1 in 5 pray while doing household chores or cooking. 15% pray while traveling, and 12% pray during exercise or other leisure pursuits. Just under half of those who pray said they believe God hears their prayers, which suggests a slim majority feel their supplications are not answered. I'm a terrible reader, apparently. 4 in 10 go further, saying prayer changes the world. A similar number say it makes them feel better. We'll be talking about all that. So family tops the list of subjects of prayer at 71%, followed by thanking God, 42%, prayer for healing, 40%, and for friends, 40%. Way down on the list comes global issues such as poverty or disasters at 24%, according to the poll carried out. According to the non-religious, personal crisis tragedy is the most common reason for praying, with 1 in 4 saying they pray to gain comfort or feel less lonely. Henry, age 64, said he prays every night kneeling by his bed despite not being religious. I worry about it quite a lot. It is some kind of insurance policy. Is it some kind of insurance policy? Is it superstition or something more real? We'll be talking about that as well. Asked if he believed in God, he said, I don't know, but I would describe myself as a skeptical end of agnosticism. I certainly wouldn't classify myself as religious. Henry, who requested anonymity, so that's not his real name, so Henry starts by silently reciting the Lord's Prayer and then asks for his loved ones to be kept safe. And, well, sometimes I include other specific people or suffering groups. Then I have a fuzzy moment about me, not concrete thoughts, and I don't ask for specific things. He said if he had no idea if God answered his prayer and said the act of praying did not make him feel better, I wonder why I don't stop doing it. Sometimes I feel it's a hypocrisy. So I'm going to go ahead and stop reading there for now. There's a little bit more, but not a whole lot that is relevant to what I'm going to be talking about today. So what we're going to be discussing about this is a couple of different things. So number one, fear. Fear is a very powerful motivator for people. Religions thrive on our fears, and they drive us to the religious beliefs, because ambiguity makes us scared. We're scared by scary movies, scary books, and things like that. And the reason we're scared is usually because we don't know what's going on or what's going to happen. Ambiguity causes fear. I don't want to beat up on this Henry person too much here, because I understand the mindset of someone who's basically been pushed into a corner by the world, something that we're all kind of feeling right now, being in different lockdowns around the world. And I don't really think that this kind of insular meditative behavior is something that's particularly dangerous. However, it's worth pointing out that the same mindset which Henry has adopted, where he kind of knows he doesn't believe but does it anyway, can lead someone down the path of becoming religiously motivated, if only by fooling themselves into believing it. There is a danger, of course, in getting to a slippery slope fallacy there, because you would say, oh, well, if you start praying even though you don't believe, you're going to become religious. Well, that's not always true, obviously. But there are obvious cases where that has happened, where people who sort of were on the fence about their beliefs kind of go one way or the other at some point, and being motivated by fear, that can lead you to a religious comforting delusion. So there's obviously that danger. And during a time of war like this, or if you want to call it a war, like a war against a virus, it stands to reason that one may be pushed into believing irrational things to soothe themselves. So it's not entirely irrational that somebody might engage in meditative activities to relax their minds. So, Henry says he prays and he's a skeptic, and I question what he means by skeptic, because I often hear people say that they're skeptical, but I don't think that they really understand what skeptical is. People think that being skeptical means to question everything, and that's kind of true and kind of not true. Being skeptical simply means that you are the type of person who will withhold believing a claim until there is sufficient evidence to believe that claim. It doesn't mean that you necessarily go through and say, oh, well, you said you had lunch today. I don't believe you. I'm questioning that. That's not quite what we're talking about. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Mundane claims require mundane evidence. So if somebody tells me they just got a pet dog, I'm probably going to believe them without any further evidence, because everything is already true about that. Like, people own dogs. I know people keep dogs as pets. I know that dogs are something that exists already. So it's really a mundane claim. Now, if I find out later that my friend doesn't actually have a dog, of course I'm going to discover that they're a liar, but nothing fundamentally changes about my worldview. When it comes to things about God and religion, that's very different. That's an extraordinary claim that strongly affects my worldview if it is in fact true. And so, of course, I'm going to hold that up to a higher standard and question that belief quite a bit more than the belief about, say, I don't know, dogs, or if you had lunch today. So being a skeptic is about standards of evidence and not accepting beliefs until there is sufficient evidence for claims. And when Henry says that I'm a skeptic and I believe and I pray anyway, I don't think he's being sufficiently skeptical about his beliefs. I think that he's afraid, obviously, but I think he's also doing this because he might, on some unconscious level, think that it might be true. And that he kind of said that as well. He said that he wonders, is it true? Is it real? Is it not? And that's kind of the wrong way to think about it. For one thing, he said he's saying the Lord's Prayer. And if you're saying the Lord's Prayer, you've already adopted some kind of specific about a religion, because the Lord's Prayer is mostly specific to Christianity and Judaism. So he's kind of glommed onto this idea of a particular God belief, not just any God, in order to make these prayers. And so I, as an atheist, how am I handling this? I don't believe there's a God. I don't pray. How do I deal with the coronavirus? Well, I don't feel the need to soothe myself with fantasies. I prefer to face reality. I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. So I don't find it particularly useful to go through and sit there and engage in prayer. Now, yeah, I'm scared. I am scared. Of course I am. I go out, I wear a mask, I do what I can to protect myself, but I'm scared that me and perhaps my wife will end up getting coronavirus. That's a scary thought. But I don't find it a need to soothe that fear with a comforting delusion. So, yeah. That's kind of where I'm at on that one. So I think if there's anybody who wants to comment on that, we might have somebody. That would be. Let's see. We have a couple different people in the chat here. I think we can go to. Let's see. Who do we have? I'm gonna go with Mamyao. So, let's see if I can get her in the chat room here. I haven't tried this yet. All right. Where is it? Sorry about that, guys. Live show, brand new. Still getting used to the new systems that we have in place. Mom Meow, are you with us today? Mom Meow? Going once. Going twice. And there she is. Okay. Hey, Mom. Yeah, how are you doing today?
Doing fine.
So what did you have? What did you have for us today? Kristine is also her name. She gave us the name Kristine. So, Kristine, I'm going to call you Kristine since that's what I have on the screen. What did you want to ask us today?
I'm sorry. Come again.
What is it that you wanted to ask today? What is on your mind?
Oh, okay. Can you give me?
I can hear you just fine. You go right on ahead.
Sorry.
You're okay. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm just curious. What exactly is atheism?
What exactly is atheism? Atheism is a lack of belief in a god or gods. That's the simplest definition. There are some definitions of atheism that include a rejection of belief such that you believe there is no God, but that tends to be viewed as strong atheism and weak atheism. I tend to not really bother with those because really the fundamental thing is a lack of belief in gods. It doesn't mean that you're claiming there is no God. It just means that you haven't been convinced of the positive claim that there is a God. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, that makes sense.
Does that answer your question, or you have some more you want to ask me about that one? You can continue if you have any more thoughts.
I'll try to digest that a bit, then
Okay.
maybe I'll come back again with the question.
All right. Well, thank you for calling. It was a pleasure to have you here, Kristine. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you as well.
All right. That was Kristine from Manila, Philippines. Thank you so much for calling in. So next up, who do we got? That was a very easy one. I like these easy calls. That's my favorite one so far. So we have a couple different names in here. Oh gosh, we have an agnostic, a Christian. I think I'm gonna go with Jared in Jacksonville, because that's my hometown, and I think if that is the correct spelling, that should be my friend who I asked to call in. And I'll try to get him on the screen as well. So let's do that. Jared in Jacksonville, Florida. How you doing, Jared?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good. Thanks for calling in. I remember asking you just the other day if you'd be able to call in, and I'm so glad you're able to.
Yeah.
So the call screener note says that, what does the Bible say about faith in the New Testament? Was that your question?
Yeah.
I'm not a biblical scholar, but my understanding, there's two different definitions provided of faith in the New Testament. There's faith as the evidence of things unseen. So faith is not a position of how you believe or what your methodology is. Instead, it is the evidence. And then there's another version of faith where faith is what you appeal to justify a belief. That's That's my basic understanding, but I'm not too keen on claiming I'm an expert on that. Does that answer the question? Maybe you can elaborate on what you think faith is in the Old Testament or the New Testament. Did I lose you? Are you still with us?
No, I was just thinking about what the Bible says about it.
Yeah, it says a couple different things. I could probably pull up the quotes from it if I can't remember which ones they are exactly off the top of my head. I used to have all this stuff memorized, but I don't anymore. So, yeah, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. That's Hebrews 11:1. I remember that one. The other one is, oh man, where is it? I can't remember. Well, that's the one that most people appear to as Hebrews 11:1, but there are other definitions provided. If you can recall one, that would be really helpful. But to what do I owe the question? What is the purpose of that question? I feel like I lost you again.
Sorry, I just sometimes pause before speaking.
Oh, that's fine.
Brevity, other reasons. The Bible says, without faith, it is impossible to please God.
Okay.
Faith.
So, okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you're fine. Continue. Continue.
Sorry, thinking still.
Okay. Well, I guess while you're thinking, I will just say we've already kind of touched on this, he and I, but obviously the listeners don't know that. So I'm just going to elaborate a little bit on that I don't see why anybody should care what the Bible says on anything. So maybe we can touch that first, because I think that's more important than what the Bible has to say about something. The question should be, why should I care what the Bible has to say?
Am I allowed to give you an answer from the Bible?
I mean, if you do, it's not really going to have much weight. So typically the way this works is, if somebody says that I should listen to the theory of evolution by natural selection, as an example, I should trust what it says about scientific evolution, or the origin of species, or what have you, that they're not just going to appeal back to the paper that was written, because that is not the evidence that demonstrates why I should care. That is the claim. So this is something I kind of touched on the other day as well, that the evidence would be something external to the claim. The claim is the paper. The paper is the book, in this case, the Bible. So if I ask you, why should I care what the Bible has to say, I'm essentially asking, what evidence is there for me to take the Bible seriously in any sense? Because I don't see that there's any reason to. And so I don't. But I'm happy to hear evidence that is external to the Bible that demonstrates why I should care. I'll give you a second to think, but dead air is a little bit rough.
Understood. All right. Well,
It's
then
fine.
I'll start by paraphrasing. So I want to make sure I understand before going on. You said that if you ask a question about science, such as a question about the theory of evolution or the origin of species, the answer to the question would be considered plain. And then you might go to a scientific peer-reviewed paper, and that paper itself is not the evidence. it is the claim, and it refers to evidence.
Yes, it's an observation, or it refers to observations and attempts to explain those observations.
Makes sense?
And I will say this: if you do say something that you feel like you misstepped or whatever, I'm not going to hold your feet to the fire on it. I'm happy to have you correct, so you don't have to sit there and think too hard about saying exactly the right thing. But I understand there is some thought necessary before you speak. I get that. So I just want you to know I'm not going to beat you up over saying something incorrectly. I'm happy to have you clarify. So yes, continue on your line of thought.
On that note,
are you done? Okay, go ahead.
On that note, I've been told that it's good to be quick to listen and also slow to speak.
Sure, I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Once you say something, you can't take it back. So you can correct, like you said, or clarify, but it's already been said. History's already been written.
Well, I wouldn't dig too much into that. I mean, this is a 2-hour show, so I don't have, a whole bunch of time to sit here and tittle over all that kind of stuff. So let's just try to have a conversation.
All right.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is your point then? Why should I care what the Bible says?
We live for at most around 120 years.
Okay.
People make claims about an eternity after those years that we live on Earth.
Yes.
So, in light of an infinite amount of time compared to a few years alive, it makes sense to consider that question.
Considering the question is fine. I'm happy to consider the question. I'm asking why I should stop considering it and accept it. Because what you pointed to was what you said, I think, if I heard you correctly, was there are people who claim there's an afterlife. We only live 100 years or so. That's all interesting, but it doesn't demonstrate that the Bible has any validity to it, and it doesn't demonstrate that there actually is an afterlife. It's just a claim. It's just an assertion. So is there any merit to that assertion? And how do you know?
Yes, there's merit.
Yes, there's merit. Okay.
But if you ask the question, why should I believe?
All right, hang on. What is the merit? Because you said there is merit. Because you made a bald assertion that there is merit, and then you kind of continued on from that. So I'm going back to that. How do you know there's merit, and what is that merit? I keep feeling like you've disconnected because you're staying quiet for like 30 seconds.
Sorry, I'm
okay.
thinking about the answer.
I mean, if you want to think about it and come back another time and answer it, that'd be fine. Because there's so much dead air here that I might just move on to another caller.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, well, thank you for calling, Jared. I appreciate it. Maybe we'll have you next week. And think about that. What is the merit, and why should I care about the Bible? So that's probably the two questions that we could talk about next week. Thank you for calling.
All right.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that was Jared. Very interesting call about Christianity and why we should care about the Bible. I'm very interested in hearing some more about that from Jared. Hopefully he'll have an answer next week. But it looks like we're not going to get too much out of him today. Just not because I don't want to waste your time just listening to people on hold and not actually answering any questions. So, I mean, not that he's not answering them, but answering them very slowly. So next up we have, I think Archie from Tondo looks like an interesting call. So let's see. Archie, you're on with PATAS Weekly. How can I help you today? What's on your mind?
Actually, I was just looking forward to listen to you guys talk about things in general. What's
Okay.
happening in the world and everything, and how religion is trying to like make our world like it's really annoying what's happening these days, and I just wanna like listen to you guys and how you see things nowadays, and
Right.
get some comforting words from you guys, because you've been like,
Well,
preaching.
yeah. I don't know that I'll give you a lot of comforting words, but I will give you honest words. I don't know that they'll be comforting, though. Sometimes honesty hurts.
Yeah. Honesty hurts, but that's what I tell my friends. Like, honesty hurts, but yeah, it's the real deal.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Is that it? All right. Well, I guess I'll try to answer your question off the call. Then I'll let you go.
All right.
All right. So that was Archie. Archie wanted to basically ask about, I'm not quite sure what his question was. It seemed to be about the status of religion in the world and how, I guess, through all this. And it kind of harkens back to the opening of the show. So I'm not really going to answer that too much. But there is a lot of delusional beliefs happening right here. A lot of conspiracy theories that are becoming more popular. And I think that this disaster, COVID-19 disaster, has brought out more people than I ever knew existed who have conspiracy theorist mindsets and fall prey to these religious ideas because they're just, I don't know. It's very strange, and I can't really explain it other than I know people are irrational, and I know people don't always care or think about whether or not their beliefs are true. That's really all I can say. But it is scary and it sucks, but the best we can do is try to combat bad ideas with better ideas, I think. So I think that's all we have for the callers today. I think there was one more, but they look to have disconnected. So if there's anything maybe Richard or Minoru would like to say, I'd be happy to hear it, because kind of running short on calls today.
We would just like to thank you for your time and everything. From the effort.
Yeah. Okay, so actually for the topics, I believe that we'll be able to cater more callers next time, but there are some things that we need to fix first on the channels, and we'll be discussing that later. But in regard to COVID, actually agree with you that there are lots of conspiracy theories that are going out nowadays, and I find it kind of alarming that in this time of pandemic, there are things that does not help the situation at all, and I believe that's something that we need to address through better ideas, like you said.
So, yeah, conspiracy theories are where people take disparate, unconnected things and try to weave together a narrative to make it make sense. And that, to me, is just wholly irrational. The trouble is trying to dismantle a conspiracy theory, because the conspiracy theorists will consistently engage in moving the goalposts in order to avoid criticism. So even if you dismantle one idea from a conspiracy theory, they'll say, well, what about this, or what about this, or what about this, instead of saying that the foundation of my claim is built on this premise. And so if you can identify a flaw in a premise, you can dismantle the whole argument. But there is no consistent or clear premise, conclusion. It's just a whole bunch of disparate facts and no clear conclusion and no clear premises that you can actually attack against, because it's just the way it's structured. It's not a logical argument. It's the same thing we saw when the terrorist attack on the World Trade Centers in the U.S. People were being alarmists about the U.S. being involved, and there's a claim there, but there's no real solid conclusion to attack. There's no premises that you can dismantle that will actually dismantle their argument, because it's not structured in a coherent way. So it's complicated, I guess, to say the least. The best thing you can do, I think, in approaching conspiracy theorists is to address the core claims if you can identify them, which can be difficult. But for example, there was one video I saw of this woman who was claiming that President Trump in the U.S. had stepped down and given away control to FEMA, for the Federal Emergency something. I can't remember the name of what FEMA stands for off the top of my head at the moment, but it basically gave control over to FEMA, who is in cahoots with China and is trying to engage in New World Order. That was her essential broad claim, that Trump had stepped down as president. And then what she did is she went and quote mined Trump from something he said about guidelines, rules. He said that he's giving up these rules. But what he was talking about was the guidelines provided by President Obama on how to deal with the Ebola virus. And that guideline was left as like a set of instructions for what a president should do in these steps, what they should take in order to mitigate a virus. And so what essentially happened there is that she quote mined. And so what you can do is point out that's a quote mine. And if that's the foundation of your claim, then your whole claim falls apart. That you can easily dismantle. The trouble is getting people to recognize that. That's the other trick, is that because they will put up defense mechanisms to recognizing the fallacies in their beliefs. So even if you identify that they've done something incorrect, they will just say, well, nuh-uh, or they'll just point to something else. And I've seen that so many times, or they'll just laugh at you for trying to present a reasonable argument. And it's difficult, it's scary, but there are reasonable people out there who are reading and listening. And I think that's the majority of people. The people who you don't hear from, that don't say anything, that don't comment, that's probably the majority. But they just read it. So there are most likely fence sitters. And those are the people who I'm talking to most of the time, are the people who are reading what I'm typing or listening to what I'm saying, rather than the people I'm actually talking to. I don't ever have any hopes or delusions that I'm going to change someone's mind in the course of a conversation. The point is not to change their mind. I would hope to. That's amazing if I can at least plant those seeds for the future of their mind to change, to work out those ideas. But I suspect that people who are listening are more likely to make a determination on where they think it's correct. So hopefully that answers that. I know I said a lot there.
Okay, so point taken. By the way, Benjamin, I'm looking at the live feed that we have on the PATAS page, and I can see that there are at least 23 or 24 viewing right now.
Yes,
and
17
there's
is
an
on my
active
end.
chat. 17.
Yeah.
So
I'm kind of ignoring the chat
there's
because they're
someone-
mostly talking to each other. I saw Manny saying, "Please God, next caller," which is funny. Thank you, Manny, for saying that. I apologize that you're not enjoying our callers. We'll try to do better next time. So yeah, this is our first show. So we didn't expect to have too many callers today. I didn't have too much of a topic set up, but I'm happy to talk about more stuff if you guys want to bring it up. But I think that's, unless we get more people in the call screening room, which I think Reggie is there. So maybe if you want to ask him what he has to say, we can just drag him in. It's up to you.
Okay, I'll just drag Reggie in.
Okay. I believe that will be Reggie Passion. Is that right?
Wait. I'll just check first. So,
Okay.
Richard is reviewing right now. So I'll just go there.
Yeah. Okay. So in the meantime, yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about conspiracy theories. So, there are a lot of conspiracy theories, including one recently that cropped up, which was the conspiracy theory about the FBI releasing a UFO photo or whatever. And I have a lot of objections to that. Number one, how do you know it's a UFO? Because people, when they hear the term UFO, they think just something unknown. But a UFO is specifically an unidentified flying object, and you haven't really demonstrated that it's flying or an object. It could just be something that was created in a CGI video, so it's neither flying nor an object. But the thing is, I see that as a serious problem for people nowadays that are just falling prey to all these different conspiracies. And I think it's partly out of fear, partly out of boredom, perhaps. And I don't know, being stuck inside really seems to have a profound effect on humans. There's a lot of studies being done about that as well, but it's all very interesting. So something came up earlier. I'll see if I can call again later. Well, you can call again now if you want. I'm happy to talk to you. We might go on a BRB for a moment, and then I'll come back in just a few minutes, and we'll continue where we left off. But I thank you guys so much for watching today. We will definitely come back, though. Hello, everyone. Thank you for waiting. I apologize. We took a little bit of a break there. So we're probably going to, unless there's anybody else who wants to call, you're welcome to call in, but this is a call-in TV show. I don't have much topics today to talk about, and I don't want to run your ears off with just me talking. So if there's anybody else here that would like to call in, please let us know, or join at bit.ly/PATAS call. You can see it on the screen right over there. Right over here. There we go. So bit.ly/PATAS call. That'll take you to our Discord where you can join in and call. As a reminder, there is a YouTube channel for us as well, and you can also go to our blog page at patasinc.org. You can also, if you are willing and able to provide a donation, consider doing so at patasinc.org/donate. And that will be that for now. So Richard is the president of PATAS Inc., and he did inform me that next week we'll probably have more callers, and we'll try to get the reach out to more Christians and theists who would like to call in and give their reasons for what they believe and why they believe it, because I do, of course, want to address claims by theists. That being said, I am open also to having a co-host on the show. So if you are somebody who is perhaps interested in co-hosting the show with us, please let me know, because talking to myself can be a little bit bland, and I understand that. So thank you, Manny, for your feedback on that one. So I do appreciate that. And we would love to have a wonderful co-host who is perhaps a little bit able to carry a conversation. And if you have a live cam, that'd be even better, because then we can have your camera on the screen with me as well. So yep, that's where we are right now. And this is a pilot episode, so obviously we're kind of dealing with technical stuff and learning how to do the call screening and all kinds of different things. So there's a lot to learn, and I appreciate your patience and your interest in being here today, guys. It's really grateful for that, and we'll definitely have more for you next week. But for now, we are going to just sit on BRB until we perhaps have something else to talk about, or until there's another caller. So feel free to come back in a few minutes, but we will still be here at least for another half hour or so, and we will get back to you. But thank you so much, and BRB. Angelo, I'm going to answer your question because it's a very interesting one. I think it's a really great question. Angelo in the chat room asks, are beliefs a matter of choice? Can we try to force ourselves to believe something we aren't convinced of? Your thoughts? That's a really great question that I would love to answer. So here are my thoughts. Beliefs are not a matter of choice in any simple sense. I am convinced, by and large, that beliefs are an act of being convinced. It's a state of mind. So you either are convinced of something or you are not convinced of something. There's no middle ground. The only sense in which you can force yourself to believe something is when you're perhaps brainwashed into believing it. You can trick yourself into believing something, but you can't actually believe something just as a matter of a conscious choice. It's just not that simple. At least that's my position. Beliefs are either you are convinced that something is true or you are not convinced that something is true. And I think that's the only two possibilities. Angelo Lee asks, when you're indoctrinated as a child to a certain belief in that context, it's not your choice. Yeah, indoctrination is probably the primary way that you can be tricked into believing something because you've been convinced. You're still being convinced. It's just a different method of being convinced. So some people are convinced by good reasons. Some people are convinced by bad reasons. And indoctrination is a particularly bad reason. And as is brainwashing, which they did in different wars and stuff like that, where people will try to brainwash people into behaving a certain way. Kuting Juan Gajitos, sorry, I believe that's Kristine from earlier. She says, I think it is a matter of choice. You either believe or you do not. It's that simple. Yeah, but that's not a choice. What you're saying is that it's an act of will, and I don't agree with that. I don't think it is an act of will. I don't think that I can simply choose to believe that gravity is not real. I am convinced that gravity is real because the evidence has made it such that I cannot not believe that. I don't have the choice in that matter. I can tell people that I don't believe gravity is real, but that's different. What I claim to believe in that case would be contradictory from what I actually believe. And so that would be me lying about my beliefs. There's also the potential that I could say, gravity's not real, gravity's not real. Maybe if I say it enough times, I can trick myself into believing that gravity isn't real. But I don't think there's any simple sense that I can simply choose to just suddenly believe, yep, gravity isn't real, and I'm going to just accept that now. I don't think it works that way. You accept that is fed to you as a child? Yeah, I think you do. Steven says, just want to say I like your voice, Benj. Have you worked in radio? No, I haven't worked in radio. I do have another live stream that I do gaming on, and that's I've been doing voiceover work for the last 10 years or so, on and off. I've also done singing and things like that. So thank you for the comments on my voice. I realize I'm more of a vocal person than a person who should probably be on camera, but I'm doing my best here. But thank you, Stephen. So hopefully that answers your question, Kristine, Angelo, about whether or not beliefs are a choice. I don't think they are. And I think a very good case can be made that they're not. And in fact, there's actually some studies. There's a book by Daniel Dennett called, Consciousness Explained, I think is what it's called. It's a very complicated book to get through, but the essential, so essentially Daniel Dennett argues that really nothing we do or think is a choice. It just is the act of cells and neurons interacting with each other, that there is no free will anywhere. I think that one is the varieties of, what is it? The varieties of free will worth wanting? Let me try to look up the name of the book so I don't keep misquoting this. But varieties of free will worth wanting. So it's a book by Daniel Dennett called Elbow Room, The Varieties of Free Will Worth Wanting. There we go. And you can go check that out on, I believe it's on Amazon, Google Books. Yeah, it's on Google Books as well. And it's not very expensive. And if you do want a copy, I think there's even some free copies out there that you can find, like PDFs of the book that exist online. There's also a couple of different talks by Daniel Dennett along the same lines as that book as well. And I'm convinced that by and large, nothing that we do is an act of free will. Everything that we do is just a product of what our brain does. It's just chemistry and physics. And that doesn't diminish it in any sense. I mean, to me, it still feels like I'm acting, and that's good enough. It doesn't bother me that I'm not actually in control. And maybe that's my own brain rationalizing it. And I'm okay with that. It doesn't change anything for me. So, yeah, that's all I got on that one. Hopefully that clarifies that one too. Maybe it's not a choice, but how does one really go from belief to unbelief? So you're asking, how does somebody go from believing something to becoming an atheist? Well, there's many, many different ways that somebody could do that. One way would just be some atheists are atheists for really bad reasons, and some atheists have actually examined critically the claims of religious doctrines. So one of the most common ways now for atheists to become atheists, you don't really become an atheist. You stop being a theist. Atheist is just the label for that. But basically, there is this core belief that you've been brought up with. And at some point, you interact with somebody else or yourself, and you start to question your own belief. And you start to say, is this actually real? And what reason do I have for it? Now, there are mechanisms within religious beliefs that prevent that sort of line of thinking, which are like, don't question the Lord, or, so I can't remember all the biblical quotes right now, but there's things like asking questions is dangerous, and the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. And so that puts up roadblocks to critical thought. But once you get past that and somebody challenges your beliefs to the extent that you're like, yeah, maybe I don't have a good reason for that. And then you start to kind of dig into it further. And then at some point, there's no probably hard line anybody could draw. There might be a couple people who can, but I can't, because it took me until I was 22 or 21, when I was still a believer before that, and studying to work in the church that I was part of. And somebody at school who was a Muslim was questioning my beliefs. And that actually didn't lead me to becoming a Muslim. It led me to becoming an atheist after about a year and a half of thought. And what happened is, after he questioned me, I started digging in the Bible for answers. And the more I dug, the fewer answers I actually found. I started kneeling down for prayer and didn't get any answers. I started looking deeper into the Bible and found things that are extremely problematic, like slavery, genocide, infanticide, all these horrible, horrible things in the Bible that are just advocated by a God that is supposedly all-loving. And how could an all-loving God ever say it's okay to own and keep slaves? That is just ridiculous to me. And so that kind of eventually led me to no longer being a Christian. I still believed in God, but I was no longer a Christian. And then I started to read more books. I kept reading. I kept building a foundation in my head of questioning my beliefs. And that led me to The God Delusion, which was the first book that I read by an atheist. And after I had finished it, that was about a week after that, I was like, this is all nonsense. I'm an atheist. I don't believe this anymore. And it was hard. It was very hard. It was emotional. It was emotional, and it was difficult, and it was a very long process. And for some people, it's a very short process. And for some people, they're raised in an atheist household, so there is no process. They just learn to question stuff from when they're a young adult. But another way that somebody can go to unbelief is by becoming angry at God, so to speak. Obviously, I don't think there's a God to actually be angry at, but there are people who suddenly, have something really bad happen, like they lose a job or their friend gets coronavirus, and they say, God, you're not real. I no longer believe in you. Well, to me, that's not a rational position. You haven't really done any critical thinking there. So there are definitely different ways in which you can come about non-belief or unbelief, but some of them are more rational than others. Stephen Tan says, acquiring knowledge is one way. Zeus was thought to hurl lightning from the sky until people learned how lightning is natural. I'm simplifying things, of course. Now, what you're referring to there, Stephen, is the God of the gaps. And that is absolutely, definitely one way people will believe in gods. They will say, oh, well, you can't explain this, you can't explain that, or we don't have an explanation for this, so therefore God, which isn't an explanation. Literally what they're saying is, I cannot explain this, therefore I can explain it. And that is a direct contradiction. They're saying God is that explanation. So it doesn't explain anything. It doesn't provide any mechanism by which this happens. It is just empty words and lip service. It doesn't actually provide any evidence. It doesn't demonstrate anything. It doesn't teach us anything new. It is a vapid claim to say that a God did something. You might as well just say magic did it or pixies did it. It doesn't answer anything. So God is the all-encompassing non-answer. Angelo Lee said, most Christians say, but that's the Old Testament on the part of slavery. And my response to that, Angelo, would be, why would you dismiss the Old Testament? The Old Testament is where you get original sin, which is why Jesus needed to come down. The Old Testament is where your 10 Commandments are. Without the Old Testament, you have no prophecy, so Jesus didn't fulfill anything. Why would you put out the Old Testament? Secondly, if God is all-loving and all-knowing and all-powerful, and the Bible is supposedly his true and inspired word, why would you get rid of the Old Testament? Was God just wrong in the Old Testament and then he got better? If so, then he was still immoral in the Old Testament. So it doesn't change the fact that there's good reasons to think that God is a moral thug, because he obviously advocated for those things in the Old Testament. And I think it's just a cop-out to say, well, that's the Old Testament, because that doesn't really solve the issue. That is a very dismissive way of arguing, and it doesn't really wash with me. I need to get some tea at some point. I'm all out of tea right now. I had some earlier. I love drinking tea on my live streams. By the way, as a reminder, you can feel free to read our blog at patasinc.org as it scrolls right past the screen right there. You can also go there and provide a donation if you're willing and able to provide a donation. Please consider that as well. That really helps the show, and it helps us out in the long term, keep the show going. We air this show every week, Saturday at 6 p.m. Today is our first episode, our pilot episode, and we definitely thank you for being here. And we're definitely going to try to get to some more callers next time. And I'm sorry that it's just me talking. But, you know, new show, new ideas. This is all brand new, first time. So this is what you get. You get some jackass on Facebook talking to you about what his thoughts are. And until we have some more people to bring in, this is what you're going to get for now. So, but I'm really grateful that you guys are here, and thank you so much, and hope you guys are all staying safe and keeping yourselves away from getting sick with coronavirus as well, because we're all in lockdowns and can't really do anything. I would like to see at one point if maybe we can start doing this live show if, you know, one day the pandemic is over, which I suppose one day it will be, and I live through it, that we will be able to actually have co-hosts and stuff anyway here in the studio, that kind of thing, or we can actually create go find somewhere to host a studio show. Maybe we can actually have a phone number that people can call into instead of a Discord, but all that requires money that we just don't have. So this is what we have right now. The poor man's live show. Oh, goodness. So any other questions from the chat room? If not, I'm going to go for a BRB really quick, and I'll answer your questions when I get back, but I do have to run to the restroom after a few minutes, so I definitely appreciate your patience and for being here. I'm going to go ahead and do that. If you guys have any more questions for me, feel free to ask them in the comments. I will read all your comments as they scroll through, and we'll try to answer them on the live chat. There we go. I see we already have a question or a comment from Kuting. I hope I'm saying that right. I apologize. I'm doing the best I can. She says, I'm in limbo between belief and unbelief. Well, that's not possible. You either believe or you don't believe. There is no middle ground. You can be wavering between belief and unbelief, but you either believe or you don't believe. Those are really the only two choices. There's a difference between not believing and believing that is not. So the example that is used often by Matt Dillahunty is the jar of gumballs. I think that was actually created by Tracy Harris on the show, Atheist Experience. But she argues that I have a jar full of gumballs on my desk, right? The number of gumballs in that jar is, in fact, either even or odd. There are no other options. The jar of gumballs count. The count of gumballs has to be either even or odd. Now, what you believe about that is separate. So if somebody comes up to you and says, I believe the number of gumballs is even, and all you say is, I do not accept that claim. That doesn't mean that you believe the number of gumballs is odd. It means you do not accept the positive claim to knowledge that the person has espoused that the number of gumballs is in fact even. And that's kind of where you are, I think. If you're between belief and unbelief, I can understand saying, well, I believed it yesterday and I don't believe it today, but you cannot simultaneously be between belief and unbelief because there's nothing to be between. But she goes on, somehow I think if there is a God and he's all-encompassing, why would he even give a damn to a number of life forms that are practically insignificant? It's a great question, and I don't have an answer for you. But at the same time, the symmetry in nature and in the universe makes me think that maybe there is some intelligence behind all of it. Have you heard the puddle analogy? The puddle of water. A puddle of water wakes up conscious and discovers, hey, the universe that I'm in, this hole that I'm in, really seems to fit me really well, when in fact it's the water that fits the hole. The water conforms to the shape of the hole. It's not the other way around. So you're actually looking at this the wrong way. The universe seems designed for us in such a way. There's some symmetry to it, as you're saying. But that's only because we're looking at it as if we are somehow the goal. We're not the goal. We're the product. There was no goal in mind. We were the thing that evolved to fit the environment around us. Now, of course, an argument could very easily be made that, and you actually kind of mentioned this, there's very little places on the earth that we can live. We can only live on a very small percentage of the earth. You can't live in the middle of the earth. You can't live in the ocean, kind of. You can't live under the ocean. So there's a limited pool in there as well, but there's also the rest of the universe is so vast, and we live on this little eensy beensy speck, the size of basically nothing compared to the universe, and yet we're expected to believe that it was designed for us, which is just absurd. So Nico says, why do you keep going on standby with nothing on? I would suggest you insert atheist-related or science-related videos. Yeah, that's, sorry, Nikos. We're new to this. This is a new show. Thank you for your comment, by the way. This is a brand new show, and I apologize that we don't have all that stuff set up just yet. We're still working on it. Next week, we're hoping to have a little bit more, and we'll, of course, continue to add to the show with different things like that. I definitely agree with you. It'd be really helpful to have some off-screen stuff. The reason I went on BRB that time was because I had to go to the restroom. But typically, if I'm going on BRB, it's because I'm waiting for someone to ask a question. I don't want to bore them. So maybe having some videos to watch would be good. Didn't really come with a lot of topics today. But this, like I said, this is our very first pilot episode of PATAS Weekly, and I'm very grateful for your comment. Thank you very much for saying that, because it's a very good comment. It's a very good point, and it's definitely something I'm going to consider for next week. So hopefully that addresses that for you, because I don't want you to think that we're just putting you on hold so you can, not have an answer to your question. It's not the point, obviously, and not to bore you by keeping you on hold. Yeah. So yeah, we have a lot going on. I mean, I have a lot going on. Like I'm also a gaming live streamer. I do live stream gamings every weekday usually. Not last week I didn't really, but last week I did, and so this is something I already do. So I already have the setup in the studio for it, and that's why I'm the host of the show. That's really the only reason. It's not because I'm smarter or better than anybody else in the program or in PATAS Incorporated. Has nothing to do with that. But yeah, hopefully we can get some good co-hosts so we can get some BRB screen stuff. That'd be really cool. And if you have any recommendations, feel free to recommend stuff to us as well. I'm happy to take recommendations. There was something else that I wanted to kind of touch on with what Kristine said, because she said at the end of her comment, she said, yet math and physics could easily debunk that there is an intelligence. And that's actually not true. To me, the concept of an intelligence, it's obvious you're a gamer. Thanks, Nikos. To me, the concept that we could debunk that there is an intelligence outside the universe is actually invalid or unsound, I suppose. And the reason it is because it's an unfalsifiable proposition currently. It might someday become falsifiable, but right now it's unfalsifiable. And that means it can't be coherently addressed by science or physics. Well, physics is a science. So it can't be addressed by science coherently. And science deals with methodological naturalism. That is we can only address things that happen in the natural world because that is what we have access to in reality. We're not able to address things outside the natural world, anything potentially supernatural. So methodological naturalism differs from philosophical naturalism in that sense. Philosophical naturalism is the belief that nothing other than the natural world exists, and science doesn't operate that way. Hopefully that clears up that as well, because you can't debunk an intelligence behind the universe, because you could just say the intelligence was extremely incompetent. So, because that's what led to the universe that we have now, that is extremely chaotic and kills people at an alarming rate because of a virus. That design was created by an incompetent intelligence, and now you've still not debunked the idea that there's an intelligence, and that's just a stupid one. You also then said, I have no idea what to believe, and I can understand that. I have no idea what to believe. That's good that you have no idea what to believe. That means that you're still questioning, that you're still searching for answers, and don't ever stop searching for answers. But I would suggest don't believe anything until you have sufficient evidence to believe, because otherwise you're going to find yourself falling into all sorts of cons and believing all sorts of inconsistent things that are potentially not true. And I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. And we need a mechanism to do that. And the mechanism that I use is the scientific method, logic, reason, requiring evidence. The foundation of reason is the logical absolutes, law of identity, excluded middle, non-contradiction. You can look into those, of course. Stephen Tan asks, regarding prayer, any non-believers here still pray while still aware it's wishful thinking? Yes, that was actually how we opened the show. There was a article that we started with called non-believers engaging in prayer or something like that. I have to look at it again, but it was an article about there are non-believers out there who engage in prayer in order to, I guess, soothe themselves of the fear of their belief or of the coronavirus. And so, yeah, there are people who are aware that it's wishful thinking and do it anyway. I think that that's probably a pretty benign thing. I think prayer has a lot of utility when it comes to relaxing people, and so I'm fine with it. I'm not objecting to that. I do meditations from time to time, and it's kind of the same thing. Prayer and meditation are very, very similar. The only difference is in one case you might be asking a fictional character for something, whereas in the other case you're just sort of relaxing your mind and trying to get your mind off certain things. And either one works for me. The only objection I have to it is that that sort of thinking can lead someone to become religious, and that becomes a very dangerous proposition. So I prefer people try to live within the real world and believe things for good reasons. But maybe that's just me. So yeah, that's it's definitely wishful thinking, though, I think. Yes. Anybody else have any comments that you'd like to add? Feel free. In the meantime, we're going to talk a little bit about PATASinc.org. That is a website that was put together by myself and a couple of the other people that we work with here at PATAS Inc., Richard Delita, Reggie Passion, and a couple others whose names are escaping me at the moment. I apologize. But the website is where we have a blog, and you can go there and read the blog. We update it every week, so probably multiple times a week. We're also working on the YouTube channel, where you can come in and watch all these live shows will be recorded and posted to the YouTube channel for later viewing, and probably clips of the show as well. So feel free to check that out at PATAS Inc. on YouTube. And we also have this Facebook page where you can, of course, open and free discussion for any and everything that's on your mind about religion, non-belief, maybe what you can do with secular therapy. That's one of the big things that I'm a very big advocate of, is the Secular Therapy Project. It's actually what led me to the Philippine atheist community here, the PATAS Inc. The Secular Therapy Project is basically a program for people who are struggling to find a therapist or a psychiatrist or something who kind of agrees with them on their non-belief, because that's important. It's very important that if you go to see someone who's supposed to help you emotionally with something, that you share similar views on certain things. Not everything, obviously, but certain things. And in this case, non-belief in a God is critical to a lot of people. And so what the Secular Therapy Project does is it connects you with these therapists, and you can call them, you can pay them by email and that kind of thing, or by PayPal, and then converse with them. Now, that the Secular Therapy Project themselves doesn't give any advice, but they do provide you with people to talk to. Now, during times like this where people are in fear and depressed and stuck inside, you might want to reach out to a secular therapist. And you can do it there at seculartherapyproject.org. Let me double check that. Seculartherapyproject.org. Seculartherapy.org. There we go. And there's also Recovering from Religion, which is like the head. There's the bigger organization above that, and there's Secular Therapy below it. And the Recovering from Religion Foundation is essentially where you can go to if you're having questions about religion. If you're not sure, they will non-judgmentally listen to you and give you feedback on your thoughts and talk to you and try to help you understand maybe where your thinking is perhaps incorrect, or what you're thinking without being judgmental about it, which is kind of what we're trying to do here as well. But they do it one-on-one there with chat rooms and things like that, where you can talk to people who are atheists or non-believers, and they will kind of guide you through your thinking, and they won't push it on you. They're not going to force it on you. They're just going to talk to you. And I think that's important. Angelo Arabit, I hope I said that correctly, says, for any single proposition, is it either true or false, or is it either true or not true? Yes. Does that question make sense? Yes, it does. So this is something I actually just had a conversation with someone else about. It's something I'm very adamant about. True and false is not a true dichotomy. A dichotomy being that, for example, this cup either exists or it does not exist. Though that's a true dichotomy. It's not like this cup either exists or it's imaginary. That's not a true dichotomy, because there are other options besides imaginary. So when it comes to true or false, is it a true dichotomy? No. The true dichotomy is true and not true, because not true doesn't mean false. There are examples that you can give, and I'll give you one in a second, where not true doesn't mean false. And one of the primary examples I like to use is logical contradictions. A logical contradiction is not true, and it's also not false. It is such that you cannot determine the truth value, so it becomes not true. So that's my answer to that one. One such example of a logical contradiction would be, the circle is a square. The bachelor is married. Those are both logical contradictions, and they are not false. They're also not true. So hopefully that clears that up. I probably may have just confused a whole bunch of people. Kuting says a lot of psychiatrists here are hardcore believers. Yes, I know this. And it kind of chafes. That's actually what, see, you brought up something really interesting there, because I actually went to, sorry, I need some water. My throat's getting a little dry. All right. So I actually, after my mom passed away a year and a half ago, year and some change, a year and a half and some change, I kind of went into a very traumatic mental meltdown for a while. And I wanted to see a psychiatrist. And I had trouble finding one that would actually be able to help me in such a way that I thought was sufficient. But I did find one. And it turns out she believed all sorts of crazy shit, such as, she was into some of this weird Freudian stuff. She thought that evolution wasn't real. She thought all kinds of things that I just couldn't get behind. And so it made me question whether or not she was even doing medicine in an effective way. And I'm not trying to question her integrity. I think she was being as honest and forthright with her profession as possible. But yeah, having a secular psychiatrist is super important for someone like me. And so I ended up I actually bumped heads with her pretty significantly and was not able to come to any agreement. And she ended up kicking me out of her practice. And that is what inspired me to reach out to the Secular Therapy Project and ask them if we can start working on creating a branch of that here in the Philippines, because I wanted to see if we can find secular therapists in the Philippines to help me and help others, of course, not just me. It's not about me, but it's in part the reason why I did this. And then also what led me to the Philippine atheist community was that whole process of talking about it. That's what ended up me building their website and me becoming the host of the show. It's all because I was just inspired to do that. So then you also said whether they don't believe or believe. Yeah, exactly. So I don't like it when my therapist was asking me to pray. It was very uncomfortable, and I didn't like that. And so, yeah, I would tell her straight up, just no, I'm not going to do that. But a lot of people are just going to sit there and take it, and that sucks. And I don't know what to say to those people other than hopefully we can eventually get a secular therapy database here in the Philippines. Right now we just don't have that. Advice to you, Benjamin: please stop smoking until this COVID goes away. I'm not smoking, I'm vaping. Vaping is not the same as smoking, although I do agree with you that smoking is dangerous and you shouldn't do it whether or not there's a COVID-19 anyway. I'm not saying that vaping is good for you, but it's certainly not as bad for you as smoking, although this isn't the vaping weekly show, so but yeah, I agree, don't smoke. That's good advice right there. Very sound. Thank you, Manny. And also thank you, Manny, for your comments earlier. I realize that the show is a little bit boring, but again, this is our first show, so we're still working on it, on getting things together and learning the layout of how this show is going to go. The show is inspired by the Atheist Experience, which maybe some of you heard of. I think, Manny, you've heard of it because you mentioned Matt Dillahunty. And so I'm all in favor of having our own style to the show. But basically the way I start something is let's start mimicking something else, and then we'll kind of go our own direction based on what works for us. Yeah. And so for us, right now what works is talking to the chat room. A good show needs a theme song. You're not wrong about that. We definitely need a theme song. I would love to create one, but my expertise is definitely more orchestral. I don't know if that's really going to appeal to anybody, so I'm kind of staying away from that one. I'm wondering if maybe there's a rock group out there in the Philippines that might want to create a theme song for the show. We also need some animation to make a cool opening. You remind me a little bit of Matt Dillahunty. I'm a lot nicer than Matt Dillahunty. I'll say that. Not by much. But thank you. I'm glad I remember. Well, he was one of my biggest inspirations, and I watch him practically every day on his YouTube channels and stuff. And it's not how I started. I didn't find Matt Dillahunty show, the Atheist Experience, Tracy Harris, all those guys. I didn't find them right away. What I found first was Richard Dawkins, and then I fell into Sam Harris's lap, metaphorically speaking, and then I discovered that there were YouTube atheists. And I was like, what? There's people on YouTube who are atheists and you can actually listen to them give their idea? Like back then it was like totally new. So you have to understand this was before YouTube was like super, super popular. It was like 2006, 2007. And then Atheist Experience, I discovered them after some clips were uploaded by some channel. I think it was like Village Idiot or something like that. And the channel was like really inspiring. And then I discovered there's actually a show you can watch. I didn't realize it was a show. I thought it was just a bunch of clips that they were recording or something. I didn't understand it back then. And now I watch the show every week. So you're more of a Dan Barker. Yeah, I could see that. I'm much more benign than Matt Dillahunty. I have the same sort of thought process as him. I agree with him on mostly everything. Not everything, but most everything. There's a couple areas of disagreement. One of them would be he's against bestiality because, and I'm not calling him out, but he's against bestiality because of what he said was informed, enthusiastic consent. Now, I'm not saying I'm in favor of bestiality. Let me clarify that before this goes too far. What I'm saying is, you can't get informed, enthusiastic consent from an animal for anything. So I think that requiring that in order to make bestiality acceptable is fallacious. And that's my position on that one. So it's like I can't get informed, enthusiastic consent from an animal for feeding them or petting them or anything else. The only thing I can get is their consent that they come to me and give me their thoughts about, I love you and I want to kiss you and that kind of thing. Not that I do that with my dog. I'm not into that. I'm just saying that his reasoning on that doesn't hold for me. If that makes sense, then we're cool. We're on the same page. Otherwise, sorry about that. So hopefully that makes sense. I realize that this is our very first episode, and I'm already talking about bestiality and all this other stuff. So I apologize for going down a little bit of a weird rabbit hole there, but there you go. Anyway, so we got another caller on the line here. We have, is it Devin?
Hello.
How you doing, Devin?
Oh, hello.
Can you hear me okay?
Hello. Yeah, I can hear you. Oh, hi.
What's up? What's on your mind?
Okay. Actually, I'm just kind of wondering, and because I have read that there's something to do about atheism, and I'll just share first that my standpoint is that for the gods that are actually on what we can say as books from religious stuff, I don't believe in that, but I believe that there's a God,
Okay.
a superior being above all. And there's something that I'm confused with atheists. And how do you get your moral code? Is it also from the religious books?
Okay, so I'm going to answer your question, and then maybe I come back to the other thing. So the way that I get my atheism, the way that I get my morality, is from an understanding of reality and a recognition that I live in a society and have to interact with other people, and that my actions impact other people. So it benefits everybody to behave as nicely to each other as possible. Now, there is something called the Secular Humanist Manifesto, which is all about secular humanism, and it describes, it's not a prescription for you to do, it's just how we think about morality. And basically, there's this concept of, there's three pillars to morality, which is, generally speaking, health is preferable to sickness. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, totally agree with that.
Okay. The second one is pleasure is generally preferable to pain. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. We're doing good so far. And life is generally preferable to death. Do you agree with that?
That is something that
You would prefer to live than to die is the question.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
okay.
believe yes, right now.
Okay. So based on those three pillars, that's what we describe as well-being. And then what we describe as morality is the attempt to increase the well-being of thinking creatures, ourselves, and society. So the way we achieve that is by trying to maximize health, preventing death, and increasing pleasure over pain. So that is sort of where we get morality, and there's certain mechanisms. It's objectively true that if you cut my head off, that is immoral. It's against my well-being. Does that make sense?
In some cultures, I believe, but there are some cultures like cutting
not
the
in
head.
some
If
cultures.
they do some.
Anywhere, at any time, if you cut my head off, it is against my well-being to do that. It doesn't matter what culture you're in.
Even if you threaten someone from my family, like we're on a standpoint, like you will be killing my son, and I cut off your head. Do you think that's moral on my part or your part, or immoral on my part or immoral on your part, something like that? I
Now
mean,
we're getting into
given that,
So, well, now we're getting into specific examples, which is fine. I'm saying that, assuming I'm just as moral and normal as you, I have done nothing else, and you just coming up to me and just chopping my head off for no reason, that would be immoral because it is in violation of my well-being. I could say potentially, although I don't think there is arguments against the death penalty that I could make, but there could potentially be an argument that under certain circumstances, you could have a justification for cutting my head off. I don't think that's the case, but you could potentially argue that, and I'm okay with that. That's called situational ethics. But what I'm talking about is the broader sense of it is immoral to murder somebody else. Murder is the unjustified killing of another person. And by cutting my head off, you are violating my well-being, because if I'm dead, I'm no longer being.
I see. Okay, I mean, I got your point on that one. So it's
Okay.
like being in nothingness. Okay, yeah.
I'm doing my best
That's
to
something
explain it.
to-
Hopefully
yeah.
that helps.
Yeah.
So-
Actually, my eyes are actually open with that one. I believe that I understood correctly that if someone will just cut off your head, that's immoral, and I agree with that.
Well, yeah, and this is obviously just one example. If somebody steals from me, that would also be objectively immoral against my well-being. It might help their well-being, but it violates my well-being. So that's what we're talking about here. And then also the well-being of society also becomes relevant. But I don't want to get too deep into that. But I will say that per your other comment about religious texts and things like that, which I agree, religious texts, I don't believe any of them, obviously. But I will say that religious moral systems are not moral systems. There are moral pronouncements about morality, and secular humanism is actually a system that can change, can be built upon, is subject to revision based on if we learn more information about humans and how we interact. So it's constantly building on past information, whereas religions tend not to change at all, other than when the society forces them to, such as when we finally got rid of slavery in the U.S. or here in the Philippines. I don't know if slavery has been completely done away with, but that's kind of where it's at in my mind. I don't see religions as providing a system of morality. They just tell you what is and isn't moral without any real justification for it.
Oh, see. Okay, yeah, got your point on that one. So, let's be fine if I'll be asking further questions. I mean, I don't want to take too much of your time with this one, but I'm interested with regards to morality and ethics, things like that.
Well, I do have a question for you. Why do you believe there is some kind of greater, higher power, deity, God thing?
This is something that I cannot yet disprove, but on the belief that I say, it's something personal. I apologize for that. But
No, it's fine. You said you can't disprove it. That's already fallacious reasoning. You're already engaged in what's called an argument from ignorance, or an argument from personal incredulity fallacy, which is basically saying, I can't disprove this, therefore I believe it's true, which is a fallacy. It doesn't make any sense. Do you believe that the Loch Ness Monster exists?
for the Loch Ness Monster, I actually do not believe that it exists or does not exist.
You don't
yet.
believe that?
But if it will be showing, yeah, I don't believe yet. But
Okay.
if it will be showing face with me,
Can you
I believe the Loch
disprove
Ness.
it?
I believe that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
Very good
Like
comment. That's exactly what I was going to say. Absence of evidence is evidence of absence. However, it's not absolute confirmation, and you cannot
Yes.
disprove it. You cannot disprove there's a Loch Ness Monster there. Just
Mhm.
because you don't have evidence
just like
for it.
Russell's teapot.
Exactly. Russell's Teapot's a great example too, and I use that one all the time as well. But yeah, I don't find any merit in saying that I can't disprove a god, so I'm going to go ahead and believe there is one, because that is a logical fallacy by definition.
Yeah, that's something that my bad. I believe I have
That's okay.
actually committed something.
Hey, we all fail on different ways in different areas. It's something we all are prone to, so don't beat yourself up about it.
Yeah, and learning through mistakes is something good. I believe about that. And about the higher being that I believe in too. It's one thing that I cannot prove nor disprove yet, but it's another fallacy. So let's just move on.
Yeah, go ahead. Just first rule of holes is to stop digging, but if you want to keep going.
Okay, going back to morality and ethics. If we will be having one culture, let's say a secluded island,
Okay.
wherein there is 100 person living in it, and there is no religion, there is no outside stimuli that is given to them in regards to what is moral and what is immoral.
Sure.
They have no contact with anyone from the outside. Like, it's just
Right.
them 100, and they live on how they learn on their own. And how do you think they will be able to develop their moral standpoint, given that they do not have any concept of the external social construct?
Well, I will say, admittedly, it's a lot more difficult when you don't have access to more people with more information. But if there's anybody on that island who recognizes the impact on the society that their actions have, they can explain that to other people, then the society can get their morals that way, just the way that I do. It's the same way that I do. But I didn't come to that on my own. It took me time to realize that the reason I don't kill isn't because there's some divine dictator telling me not to. The reason I don't kill is because I don't want to hurt someone else. And then I started to understand and dig further that other people have written about this before, and they've written secular humanist manifestos, and they've talked about it. And Matt Dillahunty's given dozens of lectures on secular moral systems. And so, yes, not having access to that information would have made it profoundly more difficult for me to come to that realization. But that's more so a fault with the fact that those people are secluded from everyone else than anything else. I mean, you can't really. The only thing I can say is maybe we can go to that island and help them understand it. Otherwise, I don't know what to do.
Meaning to say, given that they do not have anything from the outside, like moral code from religious doctrines or doctrines itself, then they will be having a different view on morality. And do you think that they will still have that kind of mentality that if they will cut someone else's neck, it will be immoral with them, or no, or something that we cannot explain, like the
I feel like there's too many gaps in my ability to assess the analogy effectively to answer that. So I don't know, would be my answer, because you would have to be more specific, and I don't know, it's very difficult to. I mean, I guess you could use the Philippines as an example. There's a lot of people here who don't understand what I just explained to you, but I'm sitting here explaining it to you right now, and so now you have that information. Now you don't have to agree with it. You can go on disagreeing with me. That's totally fine. But the more people I tell this to, the more people that listen to me, the more likely I am to potentially inform someone about how they can go about assessing moral situations or just dilemmas, things like that.
Okay. So, actually, Benjamin, your last premise actually made me smile. Given that,
did it?
Like the Philippines, and it's an island, lots of islands,
it's
and
a bunch of islands, yeah.
Lots of people here, a bunch of islands, and people are not aware of these things, which is why we are doing these things. Some people are not aware. We can say that there are some.
And I actually. Yeah, I live in the Philippines myself as well, so I don't know if you knew that, but I am actually here in the Philippines. So yeah.
Oh.
A lot of people ask me that, so I have to clarify that. Like, I'm not some outsider talking to all of you. I am actually here in the island with you.
Okay, meaning to say, it completely answers the 100-man unaware of things in the island.
Is that it? Did I help you out there?
Yeah.
Is there anything else I can do for you? Or?
For this one,
okay.
I really do not want to consume more of your time, as I think there are more people that
consume
want
away.
to have
There's not that many. Today is a very slow.
I'm actually. I'll try to construct my thoughts first. And
very good.
I'll just ask. Every when do you do this live stream thing?
This will be every week at 6 p.m. Philippine time on Saturdays. So that's the weekly time for this show.
Oh, I think. Oh yeah, next week is good. Yeah, I'll be back. So
Okay.
For now,
Yeah,
thank
your thoughts
you very
together.
much,
Can-
Benjamin.
I'll happily take your call again next week. Thank you for calling in, Denver. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much also. Yeah, I'll be back.
Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye.
All right, that was Denver from Mandaluyong, and thank you very much, Denver, for calling. So that will be the end of that call, and we'll go on to someone else if you'd like to. I'll read the comments here that I haven't been keeping up with. So let's see. Don't do unto others what you don't want done to you. Kuting, I mostly agree with you. I think Sam Harris corrected that to say, do unto others as they would have you do unto them. So the golden rule is actually better done by an atheist than done by the theists. Stephen Tan said, doesn't believe in gods, but a higher power. Caller is probably a deist. Yes, that's correct. I passed through this phase before, realized I didn't believe. Yeah, I mean, some people remain deists forever. My mom was a deist up until the day she died. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with deism, in my opinion, so much. I'm not like big into beating up on deists. My biggest concern is not deists, it's theists, because theists are the ones that are out there espousing specific beliefs and trying to try to get their beliefs implanted into government rule and things like that. And deists aren't really running around doing that, so I'm not as big as a concern. Now, the only concern I do have is that they believe something for which they don't have a good reason, and that is concerning. And I'm happy to talk to them and discuss with them, but I don't have much of a problem with deism as I do with theism. Kuting said their code of what is right and wrong will depend on how they interact with each other and how the environment they interact with. Yes, exactly. It's a very, very good point. If somebody is there like me, able to think about it and explain to them that this is why we shouldn't do X because of this reason and that reason and it violates well-being, then suddenly they have that information that they can work with. But if nobody like that is there who's thought about that to the same degree that we have, then obviously they're not going to be able to provide that knowledge to them. Stephen Tan says, it's your American accent, Benjamin. I thought you were a foreigner at first. Well, I am a foreigner. I am from the United States. I did move here 3.5 years ago now. So I am actually a foreigner. And I thank you for your comment about my accent. I hope that it doesn't sound too awful. I try to avoid the southern accent. I'm from the South, and back in the South, we all talk like this, like we got gum in our mouths. So I've always kind of not tried to ever talk that way because I don't like it. It doesn't sound correct to me. It sounds incorrect. Anyway, so we're coming up on an hour and 40 minutes. We got about 20 minutes left in the show. We've had 3 callers today, I think, was it? We had Denver, Jared, and I don't think, was Archie was on today? I don't know if Archie actually made it on. I think so. And then we also had, who was the other one? Kristine. So those were our 4 callers today. If we have anybody else, if you're interested in calling into the show, it's completely free. Go to PATAS call, bit.ly/PATAS call. There's a link right here on the screen that you can go to, and it will take you to our Discord where you can then interact with our call screeners who will ask you what it is you're calling about, and if you're an atheist or a theist, and we'll be happy to have you on the show to discuss your questions. So thank you so much for that. Pablo says, of all religious movements in the country, which has the most negative impact on society for you? For me, it's the INC, which has meddled in politics more than they care to admit. I apologize for not being totally up on Philippine politics. I do my best, but there's a lot. See, the problem is I don't speak Tagalog, which is a huge problem because most of the people that are talking, like the president and stuff like that, are talking in Tagalog, and there's not really a translator sitting there translating it for me. So I'm not able to address a lot of the Philippine politics coherently. From what I do know, I think I would probably agree with you that INC is a problem from what I've read, but I'm not an expert and I don't know enough about it to really comment coherently. That being said, just in general, I will say that the most vocal movements in religious organizations in the U.S. are the fundamentalist Christians, and those are probably the most dangerous there. In the U.K., it tends to be it seems to be the extremist Muslims who are trying to implement Sharia law, it depends on what country you're in as to what the biggest threat is at any time. So you can't really address that for every country in the world all at once. But as far as what's going on in the Philippines, I'll have to look into it a bit more. I'm happy to have, perhaps if Richard or Reggie Passion wants to come on the show and actually talk about that, maybe I can feed off of what they're saying, but I can't myself comment on it because I haven't actually investigated it too deep. The only information I have about the Philippines in terms of the politics, which I'm not going to get into politics on this show, but the only information I have right now is having followed like Duterte and watched him and tried to listen to him and read what certain news organizations are saying about him and try to make my assessments, that kind of thing. And that's where I'm at on politics and religion in the Philippines right now. I'm still new to it, to understanding it. Although it's not super complicated. It's just, what are the organizations that are the biggest concern? I don't know. But hopefully somebody can clear that up for me one day. As far as I know, though, and this is what I do know, is that the Catholic Church is the biggest organization in the Philippines. Is that probably accurate? So if I had to wager a guess, Catholicism is having a huge influence on government here. Now, I don't know that. I'm just saying that if I had to guess, because like 90% or something here in the Philippines is Catholic. Is that correct? It's some crazy high number like that. And so I would be very surprised to find out that Muslims were the most influential religion on politics here. So I don't know what is INC Catholicism, because if it is, then I would probably be correct, right? But I don't really remember. Sorry. But hopefully that answers the question as best I can. Yeah, Catholicism does have a huge clout. Well, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised they do. It makes perfect sense that they would, given how much power they have. But they would try to enforce things like anti-abortion laws or anti-drug laws that don't make any sense. I'll never understand anti-drug laws. But again, I don't want to get too much into politics. But they don't vote as a bloc. Well, that's a very good point. So apparently what you're saying, or what you seem to be saying, Pablo, is that the Catholics make up the majority, but they all have different positions on legal issues, right? So they don't vote as a whole block of people. It's not a hive mind, is what you're saying. And I think I understand that. That's true in the U.S. too. There's a lot of Christians in the U.S. who are very much against having their religious beliefs put into law and actually try to fight against that, which I'm in favor of. They're secular. They're secular Christians. And they believe in supporting freedom from religion and freedom of religion. And they think the best way to protect their religious beliefs is to keep them the fuck out of government. So I'm in favor of that, and I agree with them, and we tend to fight together. Catholic Church is the biggest, but also the most porous. I'm an atheist, but AIM is probably still on the registry. Yeah, that is a huge issue with a lot of Catholics, and especially here in the Philippines, I'm sure that's really true. Where once you're Catholic forever. You're not getting that changed on your registry, and so the statistics are probably horribly skewed, and so we may never know exactly how many atheists compared to Catholics there are, other than by using polls. We won't really be able to effectively do it with registries in the government. Kuting says this is the reason why we still don't have divorce or even a good reproductive health policy. Yeah, tell me about it. My wife and I have been talking about getting divorced. I'm just kidding. She's back there. I'm just joking. No, we actually had discussed that though. Like, is it even possible to get divorced? I didn't know it wasn't possible. I thought that, because we joke about it all the time, but I didn't know it wasn't possible. I thought that was actually something you could do. And when I learned that it wasn't, I was like, why can't you get divorced? If we separate, if she were to move to another condo all by herself and we don't interact for 10 years, why the fuck am I still married to her? You know what I mean? That's so weird. And then I can't get remarried? Is that a problem? Am I not able to get, not that I'm saying I want to, but I'm saying, would it be a roadblock to somebody getting remarried? If they're already married to someone else and they can't get divorced? That's so strange to me. So Nico says, I don't see how they have such power in the Philippines. Duterte doesn't like them at all. I don't really want to comment on that. So I think the only thing I would say to stay as apolitical as possible, because this is not a political show, is that Duterte is not the only influence in political office. He's the president. That he's, top dog, so to speak. But senators, Congress, all that stuff, all that has huge influence on how laws are drafted. So you can't put all the power on just because the president dislikes him. How do they have this much power? Because these people are influencing senators and congressmen too. So I think that would be why and how. Kuting says, I wrote down agnostic on my forums. I always get asked what it means. People need to learn more about atheism and agnosticism. Well, the thing is, atheism and agnosticism are not mutually exclusive. If I ask you, do you believe in a God, and you say I'm agnostic, you haven't answered the question, because agnostic doesn't address belief. I asked, do you believe in a God? And if you say I'm agnostic, that's not an answer, because belief is not in agnosticism. By definition, agnosticism is I don't know. And know is not about belief. Knowledge is a subset of belief, which is sometimes called justified true belief. But you can be an agnostic atheist, someone who doesn't believe in a God but doesn't claim to know there is no God. You can be an agnostic theist. You can not believe in a God but not claim to know that God exists. And you can be agnostic or Gnostic, atheist, or theist. So they're not mutually exclusive, and you can be one or both. And if I ask you, hey, Kuting, do you believe in a God? The answer is either yes or no. There is no middle ground, I don't know. There is no... the only sense in which you could say... So if you say I don't know to a question like that, then you probably don't believe. Most likely. Yeah, Angela says atheism is I don't believe, agnostic is I don't know. That's correct. Yeah, that's exactly right. And there's a difference also, to clarify, there's a difference between I do not believe and I believe that it is not. And what that is the difference, again, between the gumballs, where the gumballs are either even or odd. I do not believe they are even is not the same as I do believe they are not even, which would imply that I believe they're odd, which isn't what I'm saying as an atheist. Agnostic deist, fair enough. Dan Barker, Aaron Ra, yeah, I love those guys. They're great. Aaron Ra's funny as all hell, and Dan Barker, I've watched a lot of his debates with. I had a debate with Thomas Ross, whom Dan Barker actually debated a few years ago, and we had a live debate here in the Philippines. I don't know if anybody caught that, but basically Dan Barker was really laying into Thomas Ross pretty hard, and I tried to be a little more gentle because I actually liked Thomas. He was pretty fun, and we had some dinner and lunch together, and that was really pleasant. And he's a nice guy. He's monumentally wrong on his belief in a God, but he was a really nice guy. Yeah, I'm fine with someone saying that they're an agnostic deist. That's totally cool. I mean, like I said, I don't have as much objection to people who are deists. I still think that you need to, disparage yourself of these unjustified beliefs, but I'm not going to hold your feet to the fire on it as much as I would a Bible-believing Christian who is telling me that I need to believe in God or go to hell. That's very different. So what did... Atheists are more knowledgeable about the Bible. They tend to be, especially Christians who become atheists. Not always. Some of them don't know anything about the Bible because they never read it, and they became atheists anyway. But I would say the majority of atheists that I've met and know and talked to definitely know more about the Bible than the Christians that I've talked to. Now, there are Christians like my friend Jared who called in earlier. He knows quite a bit about the Bible. He can quote Bible verses all day long, and he can tell you pretty much exactly where a Bible verse comes from. He's very good at that, and he's better at it than I am. And I would almost consider him a scholar on the issue as far as what he knows about the Bible. But I don't really care, honestly, because the Bible hasn't been demonstrated to be true or real, so why should I even care if I can quote it? It'd be like trying to quote Spider-Man or something. So yeah, Kuting, if you want to call in, there's an open slot right now. We have about 9 minutes left in the show, and then we'll cut it off for today. But yeah, if you'd like to call in and tell us why you believe in a deist God, I'm certainly open to hearing your argument. Unless you are just believing it and you don't really have an argument, or if you'd like to just discuss it in general. But if not, you could always wait till next week when we'll have a little bit more time to talk, and we could do it then as well. I hope you can have a discussion on how we can address or counter the influence of religion governing politics, such as block voting, etc. We're in this shit because of the likes of Kubaloy and Manila. Well, to be honest, I'm not a political scientist. I'm not an expert on that topic. I can only suggest that we try to not tell people who to vote for, but rather to influence as many people as we can, like a show like this does, to teach them about logic, reason, evidence-based thinking, so that we can try to get people realizing that imposing your religious beliefs on other people is demonstrably a shitty way to create a society, and it doesn't work. Theological, what is it? I can't even think. I'm not a political scientist. I don't remember these terms. But a theocracy. There it is. Theocracy is one of the most failing, most horrible forms of government that we've ever come across. Not the only one. There are several others, but it is demonstrably a terrible way to run a society, to tell people that this is the religion of the government, that kind of thing. I'm not saying they do that here in the Philippines. There's freedom of speech and stuff like that, but still, there's lots of influence, and it could potentially be argued that eventually, maybe, they might get so much power that they could start overturning things like freedom of speech. I don't know if that's possible. Again, I don't know the law here that well. But yeah, it's scary stuff sometimes to think about how much power they have and how much influence they have. And then what really grinds my gears is when I tell them that I don't want their religion imposed on me, they will cry persecution, which is just absurd. The idea that they're being persecuted because I'm telling them to keep their religion between them and their God, or between them and their fellow religious people, is patently absurd. I'm sitting here saying, I don't want to be forced by your beliefs that are not justified by reason, evidence, and reality, that I shouldn't have an abortion. Well, not that I can, but that I shouldn't be allowed to smoke pot or get a divorce or do any number of different things that religion tells me I can't do because they say it's immoral without any justification. Nico says, what were you doing in Texas? Just visiting Six Flags? Did I say I went to Texas? Oh, you're talking to Elaine. Okay, I was like, wait a minute, I didn't say I went to Texas, did I? So, where was this? Who else we got talking here? Manny says those guys belongs to the top 10 religious leader. Yeah, probably. True, like they're forcing their beliefs on others. Yeah, they're forcing their beliefs onto us. And they cry persecution when they can't have the government enforcing that. And that's just stupid. If you don't want to, have sex with a man and get married to him, don't. No one's making you do it. No one's making you get homosexually married. It's not like if suddenly we allow homosexual marriage that we're forcing you to get married to a guy or a woman, or transsexual, if that's your thing. I don't care. Whatever you're into. But if you're not into it, don't fucking do it. Don't tell me I can't do it. That's absurd. I should have the right to do it. So, I get really sick of these Christians and theists in general that talk about persecution because their laws are being taken down. No, we're protecting you. We are protecting your laws so that you can go and believe whatever irrational crap you want to and live a boring life of servitude to your imaginary friend. So anyway. Spain forced us to be Catholics. Yeah, the Spanish invasion on the Philippines, I read about that. I've read a little bit of the Philippine history, not an expert on that either, though. Look at Manny Pacquiao's proposal for a National Bible Day, for example. He's one for theocracy. I might have to do that. We might actually have that as a topic at some point. I might look further into that and comment on it. Yeah, we do need a Tagalog-speaking co-host who can help me translate what someone is saying. I think, leaving it for now to English speakers is acceptable because I think most Filipinos speak it well enough that I can understand what they're asking, and hopefully they can understand what I'm saying in response. But I would like to have a Filipino speaking co-host as well. But yeah, I think we're coming up on the last few minutes of the show here. So I'd like to thank you all again. Don't forget to check out our blog as it scrolls right across the screen at patasinc.org. There you can also provide, if you are willing and able to provide a donation, at patasinc.org/donate. There's also a button on the main page, and you can provide a donation through PayPal. It really helps out the organization. It helps us keep this going. And I would also like to say that this does air weekly. Right here, Saturdays at 6 p.m. And you can go to bit.ly/PATAS weekly to get to the show. And also you can go PATAS call, bit.ly/PATAS call to call into the show. So thank you so much, everybody. We are coming up on the last couple minutes here, so I'm going to go ahead and end the stream here for now. But are there any further questions? Anything I can answer last minute? Thank you, Manny. I'm sorry it was boring at first, but like I said, we're sort of getting into a flow, and this is all new to me. So I'm doing the best I can with my ability as a speaker to do this. And thank you for supporting the stream, everybody. And thank you for liking and sharing the stream. Thank you for all your ideas and your comments and your questions. Thank you to our callers. And of course, thank you to the PATAS Incorporated for sponsoring the show. What's the M? I'm not going to tell you. It's a secret. Yeah, actually, it stands for Maisonet. It's just too long to put on the screen. So it would be like it would just fill the whole screen. So I didn't even bother. Anyway, thank you so much, guys, and I will see you next week. We'll be back again at 6 p.m. on Saturday, and we thank you so much for your support, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.